12:04 UTC on August 11, 2025. The calm waters around Scarborough Shoal explode into chaos. Just 12 nautical miles from the reef, the Philippine Coast Guard cutter BRP Suluan is pushing north, escorting two small civilian relief boats loaded with food and fuel for local fishermen. On her tail, a Chinese Coast Guard ship hull number CCG 3104 is closing fast. Its water cannon is already firing, streams arcing across the bow of the Suluan like liquid whiplash. At this range, those jets hit with the force of a sledgehammer capable of shattering windows and sweeping crew off their feet. But the chase is about to get far more dangerous. Cutting in from the port side, a massive silhouette emerges. A People's Liberation Army Navy destroyer hull number 164. This warship is armed for battle, not for crowd control, and it's moving at speed through contested waters. The three vessels are now converging in a narrowing triangle of open sea. The CCG, skipper, locked on the Suluan, throws his wheel hard to intercept. The destroyer, unaware of the maneuver, keeps its course. Two ships, one collision path, seconds to impact. Out here, there's no room for error. And there's no easy way to explain why two ships from the same flag are about to slam into each other. Scarborough Shoal might look like nothing more than a ring of shallow reefs and turquoise water, but in the South China Sea, it's a powder keg. It sits well inside the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, just 124 nautical miles from Luzon's coastline. Under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, that should make it Philippine territory. But in 2012, Chinese vessels seized control and never left. Since then, Beijing has enforced its claim with a rotating presence of Coast Guard cutters, maritime militia boats, and when they want to send a message, full-blown warships. Neither side is backing down. On August 11th, the Suluan's mission was straightforward: escort two relief craft into fishing grounds near the Shaw, deliver supplies, and head back to port. But any Philippine ship venturing this close to Scarborough Shoal is shadowed sometimes aggressively by Chinese units. That's what brought CCG 3104 into the picture. The destroyer with hull number 164 wasn't there for humanitarian work either. It's a Type 052 Luoyang 3 class guided missile destroyer bristling with vertical launch cells, anti-ship missiles, and long-range radar. Normally, it patrols in formation. On this day, it was operating close to the Coast Guard cutter, likely as part of a layered blockade. In theory, ships from the same nation should coordinate to avoid incidents. But when speeds are high, tempers are up, and radio channels go silent, rules and reality part ways. The moment the BRP Suluan cleared the shore's shadow, the chase was on. CCG 3104, a 1,500-ton Chinese Coast Guard cutter, pushed its twin diesels to the limit, spray boiling off its bow as it closed the gap. Its target was the Philippine patrol ship escorting two slow-moving civilian boats. The goal wasn't subtle. The water cannon roared to life, sweeping the decks of the Suluan with high-pressure streams that could knock a crewman overboard in seconds. Water cannons are a preferred harassment tool in these encounters. They're non-lethal on paper, but at close range they can shatter glass, tear away antennas, and cause dangerous flooding on exposed decks. For the crew of the Suluan, every blast meant ducking behind armored shields and holding tight against the rolling sea. What made this pursuit different was the cutter's approach angle. Instead of tailing directly behind, the Chinese skipper swung wide to port, aiming to cut across the Suluan's bow. A textbook interception maneuver used to force another vessel off course. At speeds approaching 20 knots, the margin for error is razor thin. Radio calls from the Suluan went unanswered. The CCG cutter kept pressing in, its sirens blaring over the cannon's hiss. The Philippine vessel held its course, careful not to make a move that could be spun as aggressive, and then came the miscalculation. Through the spray, the bulk of the PLA Navy destroyer loomed closer. The CCG's cutter intercept path wasn't just crossing the Suluan's line, it was crossing directly into the destroyer's track. The cutter's captain locked on the Suluan, pushed through the intercept line without noticing how little space remained. By the time the destroyer's crew spotted the danger and signals, it was too late. The CCG's bow, already angled across the destroyer's port side, slammed forward. The impact was brutal. Steel crumpled at the cutter's bow, buckling inward like paper under a fist. The forward gun mount twisted in its housing, its shield warped from the force. Internal, bulkheads groaned and split for the destroyer. The damage was superficial. Long, jagged scrapes gouged into her port plating. Paint sheared away in streaks of bare metal, but the shock ran through her hull, rattling fittings and shaking crew from their posts. On the cutter's foredeck, several crewmen had been visible moments before, watching the chase from the rails. When the bow struck, they vanished from sight, tossed back from the sudden halt. Whether they were injured or simply thrown out of view was unclear. In those first seconds after impact, the scene was chaos. The destroyer's horn blared, the cutter's engines cut off. Over VHF, the Philippine crew offered immediate assistance, medical aids, man-overboard search damage control teams. Every call was met with silence. The destroyer backed off slowly, turning away. The cutter sat low in the water, bow submerged and dead in the swell. Unsafe would be the polite term. In operational reality, it was finished. A Chinese pursuit had just ended, not with a warning shot, but with one of their own ships crippled in front of the very vessel they were trying to intimidate. Back on the deck of the BRP Suluan, the collision was a mix of shock and disbelief. Moments earlier, the crew had been bracing for another blast from the water cannon. Instead, they watched the Chinese cutter slam head onto its own Navy's destroyer, an impact that sent a deep metallic boom rolling across the water. Through binoculars, Philippine officers saw crew members on the CCG's foredeck stumble, clutching railings, and in some cases vanish behind the mangled bow. The cutter's deck crew had been exposed, working without the heavy safety gear you'd see on a warship, and at that speed, even a sudden stop can hurl a man several meters. Within seconds, the Suluan's radio operator was on an open channel. Chinese vessel, we can provide medical assistance. We can assist in search and rescue. No reply. The offer was repeated twice more in English and in Mandarin. Silence. The destroyer's crew seemed focused on assessing their own vessel. Damage control parties moved along the port side, inspecting the scrape marks. The cutter's crew were gathered aftway from the buckled bow, their movements slow and cautious. From the Philippine perspective, the refusal to accept aid was telling. Accepting help from the very ship you'd been chasing would be politically awkward. Better to handle it internally, even if time was critical for anyone hurt. By now, the civilian relief boats had pulled clear, staying out of the line of sight. For them, this mission was supposed to be routine. Bring food and fuel the fishermen? Instead, they just witnessed an international embarrassment play out in real time. And for the Chinese crews, the reality was inescapable. Their high-speed intercept had ended with friendly steel meeting friendly steel on open water under the watch of foreign eyes. Within hours, Manila made its position clear. Philippine Coast Guard spokesman Commodore J. Torella called the event atrocious and inane behavior, accusing the Chinese cutter's captain of violating coal rigs, the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea. He emphasized that the maneuver wasn't just reckless, it risked lives on all three ships and could have triggered a broader crisis. Triala also confirmed that the BRP Suluan's crew had offered assistance immediately after the impact. We offered help, medical search, and rescue. They refused. That says a lot, he told reporters. For Manila, the refusal reinforced their narrative. Beijing was willing to risk safety to maintain face. In Beijing, though, the response was very different. Chinese Coast Guard spokesman Gan Yu acknowledged a maritime encounter, but made no mention of a collision. Instead, he framed the operation as monitoring, pressing from the outside, blocking, and controlling actions he described as lawful enforcement within what China calls its territorial waters. No photographs of the damaged cutter were released by Chinese state media. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. stepped in the next day, vowing that Philippine ships would continue to operate in these waters. "We will not be deterred. These are our fishermen, our seas, and our duty," he said during a press briefing. For outside observers, the contrast was stark. One side described a dangerous miscalculation and near disaster. The other side treated it as a routine enforcement patrol with nothing unusual to report. Diplomatic channels remained quiet. There was no joint investigation, no hotline call, no public statement from either navy. In the South China Sea, silence after an incident can be as telling as the incident itself. And this silence spoke volumes. Scarborough Shoal is more than a disputed reef. It's a chess piece in one of the world's most strategically vital waterways. The Shoal lies within the Philippines' 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. But China has maintained control since 2012, building a near-permanent blockade with Coast Guard vessels and maritime militia. In 2016, a United Nations arbitral tribunal ruled China's claim invalid under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. Beijing dismissed the ruling outright. For Manila, every patrol near Scarborough is a statement. The Philippines will not concede its rights under international law. For Beijing, every interception is a reminder that control rests with Chinese ships on the water, not with rulings in the Haichi. The incident on August 11th is just the latest in a long string of confrontations. In recent years, Chinese Coast Guard cutters have used lasers to temporarily blind Philippine sailors, blocked resupply missions to outposts in the Spratly Islands, and rammed fishing boats. In each case, Beijing insists it is enforcing sovereignty. What makes Scarborough especially sensitive is its proximity to major shipping lanes. The South China Sea handles over 60% of global maritime trade, worth an estimated $3.4 trillion annually. We're talking oil tankers, container ships, and bulk carriers that pass through here daily. A conflict here wouldn't just affect the Philippines and China. It would ripple across the world economy. The military dimension is equally critical. The South China Sea is within range of China's expanding network of military outposts, which are artificial islands armed with runways, radar arrays, and anti-ship missile batteries. From these positions, the People's Liberation Army Navy can monitor and, if it chooses, control vast stretches of the waterway. Scarborough Shoal, if developed militarily, would extend that reach even closer to the Philippine mainland. All of this plays into what analysts call gray zone tactics. Assert control without triggering open war. Water cannons instead of gunfire. Ramming instead of missile strikes. The August 11th collision was never intended, but it happened inside that high-stakes game where every move is designed to test the other side's resolve. For Beijing, the incident will likely be buried in silence. For Manila, it's already part of a growing record, proof that even routine harassment carries real risk. And for the crews involved, the memory won't fade soon. At sea, you remember the moments when steel hit steel. The South China Sea has seen decades of close calls. Jets buzzing cockpits, ships crossing bows, fishing boats rammed in the night, but rarely does the danger turn inward. August 11th showed that, in the rush to intimidate, even the most disciplined formations can break down. So here's the question. Do you think this was an accident born from overconfidence or a high-risk intimidation tactic that backfired? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to go a step further and support our channel here directly, join the fleet. You get loyalty badges, priority responses, and help us bring more true maritime stories to the surface. Click join on our channel page and get on board. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive into the world's most intense maritime encounters. And remember that out here, it's not the size of your ship that counts. It's whether you're pointing it in the right direction. I'll see you in the next one.